Do you assume that the farmer knows EI when they make their input choices? They just
The I?
the EI, the like productivity sum.
No, they have expectations.
So they don't know productivity sum.
No, we assume they. Well, at least they don't know all of them. There's a big part they don't know.
So you model all these shocks and all the time dependencies and mention something else after that as probabilities that you put into this big system of equations.
So from the production shocks, we concentrate on rainfall shocks, which is arguably the biggest shock for rice cultivation, especially because in Thailand, rice production is, rain-fed. There's no irrigation systems. And what we do, we use historic rainfall data, which we have going back to like 1970, to construct farmers' expectation of, rainfall for the next 2 or 3 months based on rainfall up to that point in time when he makes the decision.
And this uncertainty about the rainfall, for instance, and also uncertainty about the other factors like the labor market that you mentioned at the high level. How are they modeled inside? I'm asking technical. Are you going to get to it or?
To the labor market? No.
To the
technical,
technicalities.
no. If you have questions about
me.
technicality, no, ask me now.
Okay.
So for the labor market, like I said, we assume that the price, like labor wages, are predetermined, and they're not affected by, rainfall in this village. And the reason we do that is because there's a lot of labor migration. So, for example, if there's like no rainfall in one village, it doesn't mean that prices will be determined by the aggregate shock because labor will move around.
Yeah. But in the maximization formula that you have, how does that show up as what?
So they maximize. When they do maximization, they take into account the price level.
So, but those are expectations, right?
No, we assume that they know them. Yeah. But yeah, not like a more sophisticated, maybe more appropriate way will be to model them as expectations.
Okay. So I was wondering, like the uncertainty about rain, or I
So
mean,
the
you treat
uncertainty
uncertainty as expectation, and you say expectation. I'm going to just come up with some educated guess about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
with respect to rate.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Prices are taken as kind of norm.
But, so they know the price of rice.
Yeah, and
But shouldn't that depend on the rainfall and stuff too?
it should, but on the other hand, for Thailand, rice is like one of the major exports, so it's just kind of determined the world. And you had And one thing I wanted to note, in our data, we have very large variation in rice yields, and we measure yields as kilograms per acre. So in our data set, we have plots from 4 different villages in the same province, but these villages and their plots are located very close to each other geographically, and they're all mixed together. So this variation in yields doesn't come from, geographical variation.
Do you assume that they're going to keep the same surface, planted with rice, and it's not going to change from?
We have data on the actual area they use for rice cultivation each year. So even if 1 year they use half of the floor, we take that into account.
Okay.
And to do the estimation, we need some measure of the intermediate output for intermediate stages 1 and 2, and that's where we use PSAT.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to talk now about, we have a lot of pretty complex models going on. In this paper, Kamilya just showed you the economic model, which she created, and we also use something called a crop model to estimate crop yields using a completely different approach. It's a biophysical model that has soil and weather inputs. And we also use a stochastic weather generator to generate stochastic realizations of future weather. And we condition those on predicted climate changes from some global climate models and some different economic scenarios. So I'll talk about that. Yes, Tibby.
So you're using this just as a way to measure how much intermediate production has been produced in the intermediate steps, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't need it. You would just measure the actual output, the actual rice output. This
Yes.
is why you need to evaluate how much the rice is on the right path, and then need this function to essentially plug it into a Herd model. And
Correct. Yeah, we don't have any data on the mid-stage crop yield. So the crop growth process is not just linear across the course of the year. There's different stages. There's the seeding, the germination, and the harvest. And so we use the DSAT to proxy those mid-stage inputs and outputs. And another reason we use the crop model is the crop model gives us a it gives us a crop response due simply to soil and climatic factors. So we have sort of a clearer lens into what is the impact of the environment on the crop output. Okay, so a crop model is a biophysical model. These are developed in soil science field, and they've been around for 20, 30 years. They're computer models. They take a large range of inputs, soil, a lot of specific soil parameters, including a depth profile going down with depth, a pH, organic matter content, cation exchange capacity, the texture of the soil, the amount of nitrogen in the soil. They also take weather conditions, temperature, maximum and minimum temperature per day, solar radiation amounts, and precipitation, and a few farmer inputs, major inputs that the farmer does, such as the amount of fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides, the amount of seedlings that are inputted into a particular plot. And all of those go into, they use very sophisticated models that capture these nonlinear effects. The response of the crop to fertilizer or rain or temperature is not linear. And there are models that are developed in soil science that are calibrated in laboratory conditions that describe how the crop grows step by step. And all of these are integrated, so we're able to run all of these, even though we're not soil scientists, we're able to run these models in this software and get a predicted yield output. So there are different crop models that we could choose. We decided to go with one called DSAT, largely because it's very well known and well respected. It's been around for about 15 years. It's maintained by a community of scientists, has a modular modeling approach, so they can, if they have a better model to describe, say, the photosynthesis of the plant, they can modify it and input it. And what it's literally modeling is the growth of a single plant across the whole calendar year. It's designed usually to be used on a plot-by-plot basis. It has literally a couple dozen inputs that can be inputted for soil and weather. This is a listing of some of them.